In the early hours of March 4th, 2024, 10-year-old Shay Kang was murdered in her own bed by her mum. Now that's a sentence I never thought I'd say, but it's something that happened really recently, and it's a story I need to tell you, because people need to hear this. Now for the past few months I've been working closely with Kaylee Colclough. She helped raise Shay for the first half of her life, and her insight has been invaluable to providing some much needed context for this case. There is a petition at the end which I'll mention, which you may want to go and sign, and I've linked it in the description, but I'm going to get on now with the story of Shay Kang and what happened to her. Shay was born on February 2nd, 2014, and her birth parents were Jazkirat Kaur, that was her mum, and Hadi Hamad, her dad. We're going to refer to both her parents by just their surname for the rest of the video. Now, Kaur was also known as Jasmine Kang, but I'm just going to keep calling her Kaur going forward. And the story actually starts when Kaur was in the very early stages of pregnancy with Shay. She and Hamad turned up at the door of Kaylee in Smethwick, West Midlands. They needed a place to stay. Kaur said she'd been disowned by her parents, her family lived in Leicester, and they'd been kicked out. Now, Kaylee knew Hamad, didn't really know Kaur other than by association. His father worked in a shop in the local area, so that's the connection between Kaylee and Hamad. Now, to say their relationship was a toxic one would probably be a bit of an understatement. They had some violent arguments, it wasn't a great situation for anyone involved in the property. And I think the main issue was because Hamad's family was of the Islamic faith and Kaur's was of the Sikh faith. The families were clashing heads, and ultimately, Kaylee kicked Hamad out because she wasn't going to kick a pregnant woman out on the street. If anyone had to go, it was him. Now, over the next 8 months, Kaylee welcomed Kaur into her home, and her family did the same with open arms. They treated her as one of their own, even though they had reservations at the start. This was a pregnant woman after all, and it wasn't the innocent baby's fault that her parents had a falling out. So Kaylee, not having kids of her own, took on the role of that second parent. She went to every scan, every meeting. She bought all the new things that parents need, a cot, clothes, everything. If you've got a family like I have, you know what I'm talking about. And Kaylee also financially supported Kaur 100%. It wasn't until the latter stages of her pregnancy that she applied for benefits in a way of supporting herself a little bit, finally. To put into context the close bond between Kaylee and the as yet unborn child, it was Kaylee who went on to cut Shay's umbilical cord. The name Shay itself means gift, and it's also Yah's backwards, Yah meaning God. Shay was literally Kaylee's gift from God. And her initials, KC, so her full name was Shay KC Kang. KC stands for Kaylee Colclough. And from a very young age, Shay was loved dearly, by Kaylee specifically. Shay was funny. She made friends easily. She lit up the room whenever she walked into it. She made friends easily at school. A really good, well-liked, funny, responsible little kid. And it were Kaylee that gave her all the love any kid deserves. She'd hug her when she cried, cheer her on when she did something well, buy her things, do all the things a responsible parent does. But behind the scenes, things weren't as peachy as they first appeared. And this is where the months of discussions I've had with Kaylee is very prevalent, because she's provided me with some real insight behind the scenes information of what went on during those first 5 or so years behind closed doors. And as a warning, this does involve instances of child abuse, so that's an extra content warning for you. When Shay was just 2 years old, she'd gone off her food a little bit. She wasn't feeling very well. Now, you, me, we're the same. Adults, kids, doesn't matter. If you're ill, you tend to go off your food. Now, all Shay wanted was a McDonald's. So Kaylee went out and bought the 3 of them a meal. When she got home, Kaylee went upstairs to eat hers, leaving Shay in the company of her mother. And within moments, Kaylee heard screaming coming from downstairs. As she entered the room to see what was going on, Kaur was forcefully feeding Shay her burger. Shay was clearly distressed and Kaylee was horrified. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Not long after that, Shay was just playing, messing around as toddlers tend to do, and Kaur kept asking her to shut up, repeatedly. When she was persistently being ignored, kids tend to ignore the parents, she smacked her on the head, escalating the situation greatly. In seeing this, Kaylee picked up Shay and backed out towards the balcony to get away from Core, but this only angered her. She then reportedly went out onto the balcony and tried to push Kaylee, who was holding Shay, over the balcony. This wasn't just an aggressive outburst, this was downright dangerous, and things were escalating at quite a pace. One time at a family birthday party, Core twisted Shay's ear so hard that she screamed in agony. The reason? She tried to grab her mum's newly acquired glasses. The first time she tried to grab them, she got a tap on the hand. Not being dissuaded, she tried to grab for a second time, and that's when the ear twist happened. On another occasion, Shay asked Kaylee if she could call her mummy. Core, being the jealous type, was furious at this and forcefully dragged Shay to her room. And this next part is particularly harrowing. When Shay was 4 years old, Kaylee had gone away to her family's caravan with her mum for a week, a bit of a getaway. Again, that left Shay home alone with her mum. So a few days into the holiday, Core called Kaylee and said that Shay had burnt her hand. When Kaylee asked how this had happened, Core said that Shay had knocked a hot cup of coffee out of her hand and burnt herself. Now again, that is quite plausible. Kids are clumsy by nature, and a burn such as that would be painful, but you wouldn't be overly concerned that you'd need to go to, say, a burn unit. However, Kaylee did the responsible thing and urged Core to take Shay to the hospital to get it looked at to make sure it wasn't worse than it first appeared. This simple request got ignored, and upon seeing a picture of the burn, Kaylee realised this was no minor incident. Her hand was in a real state, so she once again urged Core to take Shay to the hospital ASAP. So what did Core do? She ignored Kaylee's request once more. She did finally take her to the hospital the next day, and the hand injury turned out to be a second-degree burn. When Kaylee got back home, she went on a shopping trip with Shay at one point, and it was just the two of them. So she asked her candidly, "What happened to your hand?" Now kids, if anything, are brutally honest. Shay told Kaylee, who was her godmother, "Mummy did it on the fire." Now, for the record, and Kaylee did openly admit this, she has no concrete evidence to confirm that Core did this to Shay's hand. However, she has said that she would take Shay's word any day over Core's. But with no proof, there was nothing much she could do. She wasn't a blood relative, she wasn't her real mum, remember, so she literally had her hands tied. All she could do was try and be as protective a presence in Shay's life as she possibly could. And as Shay got older, the tension continued to escalate. Core continued to shout at Shay all the time and kept picking fights with Kaylee. On Kaylee's 30th birthday, the family had planned to go to a nice Greek restaurant. This was an occasion Shay were looking forward to. She'd get to spend some quality time with Kaylee's nieces and nephews, some real kid-on-kid time. But on the way there, when Kaylee wanted to get some photos of the three of them, Core was pushing Shay out of the photos, not allowing her to be in one. That all but ruined the night for the little girl. And then, one day, out of nowhere, Core informed Kaylee that her and Shay were moving out. And again, what could Kaylee do? She had no authority, no right. She had no way of stopping this. There was no legal loophole for her. She just had to bite her lip and accept it. The new home was located on Robin Close in Rowley Regis, and Kaylee and her family helped Shay and Core move in. Kaylee even decorated Shay's bedroom into a Disney princess theme, which she absolutely loved. She would positively beaming the first time she came home from school and saw it. Core, however, was miserable all day when the room was being decorated, and once it had finished, she turned to Kaylee and said, "Well, now you've done Shay's room, are you going to do mine?" This wasn't a well-timed quip. She didn't say it with a smile on her face or a smirk. She was deadly serious. She was jealous that her daughter had had her room done out, and she hadn't. And after that, contact became less and less. Kaylee was being shut out by Core. She kept her and Shay away from everyone, really limited the contact. The last time Kaylee saw Shay was about 6 months after that. Core had taken her to Kaylee's flat to ask for some money. While stood there with Shay in tow, the young girl said, I wish I could come home. She didn't mean back to Cause on Robin Close. She meant back to Kaylee's flat. The place she was loved. The place she felt safe. Her home. Kaylee was quickly shut out properly after that when Core started a new relationship. But she did tell Core that when Shay got older, she would be reaching out to her. Sadly, thanks to the actions of Shay's mum, Kaylee never got the chance. And in those subsequent years, things just got worse and worse for little Shay. She hadn't been to school in the final month or so of 2022. She attended Brick House Primary, and by all accounts, she was bright, fun, well-liked by the pupils and teachers alike. But because of her lack of attendance, the school were understandably concerned. So they asked for what's called a safe and well check. This is basically something that happens where people, usually social services, go around to the house just to make sure the kid is okay, being looked after, see if there's any underlying issues as to why they're not attending school. And when social services went round to the house, Core said that lasers and technology was spying on her. That should have been red flag number 1. But instead of escalating things, they had a quick look round the house, saw that Shay had enough food, plenty of toys to play with, and they urged Core to go and see her GP about her paranoia. With that, the case were closed. No further action were taken. No plans were put in place. Core was told to take Shay back to school, but she didn't. For 8 months. It was only in September 2023, the start of the new school year, Shay would have been going into year 5, that another parent told the school that they had reported the situation to social services themselves because they weren't happy with what was going on. The school, on the back of that, asked for a second safe and well check. This time, when social services turned up, they found the house in complete darkness. And what's more concerning is that not only had Shay's physical condition deteriorated, she'd also regressed mentally. She was barely able to walk and talk at the level a girl of her age, she'll have been 9, should have been able to. This was a child who'd been neglected so badly that her verbal and motor skills had severely regressed. But instead of putting her on what's known as a child protection plan, social services instead put her on a child in need plan. That's a step removed from it. So even though she was deteriorating physically and verbally, even though she was practically resigned to her room all day in total darkness, her mother didn't speak to her, she was left to stare at the roof, daydream, or play on a Nintendo Switch, they didn't deem it severe enough to put her on a child protection plan. Still, she had some support in place at least, and she did eventually go back to school. And as soon as she did, the improvement in her verbal and motor skills was almost immediate. She soon caught up. It's as if she was given a new lease of life by being let out of that dark home with her mother. And during a subsequent visit, social services noted the house was still in total darkness. And throughout the visit, Core didn't speak to her daughter once. Her mood was described as low and her interactions with Shay as non-existent. But just 1 week later, at the end of February 2024, they signed off the Child in Need plan. They closed the case. 1 week after that, Core took Shay's life. Shay had only just celebrated her 10th birthday a month earlier. And on the evening of March 3rd, it was a Sunday, she was seen out playing in the cul-de-sac with the little friends of the community. It was a normal Sunday. She was probably counting down the hours until school the next day. No one could have predicted what was going to happen just after midnight on March 4th. According to Core, she walked into her daughter's room with a knife in her hand and stabbed her. This awoke Shay, and she apparently said, "Ow, I hate you." This was a 10cm long Swiss Army knife. And not satisfied with stabbing her daughter once, she then covered her face with a pillow and stabbed her 10 more times. One of the wounds to her stomach was so deep it went 2 centimeters beyond the length of the knife, and it pierced her liver in the process. Now I do apologise for being so graphic here, especially on YouTube, but Shay's story is such an important one to tell that omitting it just doesn't make sense. And it's not like Core phoned the police straight away. She waited 12 hours. Just after midday, she phoned the police. She gave her name, gave her address, and simply said, "My kid is dead." before hanging up the phone. Why did she wait 12 hours? She said she wanted Shay's body to be cold, so there'd be absolutely no chance of saving her. Let that sink in. When police arrived, they thought Shay might have been sleeping because she'd been covered up with the duvet. It was only upon pulling it fully back that they realised that this was an absolutely devastating situation. Kaylee was informed later that evening about 10:30 at night by her mum and sisters who turned up at her door. They said that bitch has killed her. Kaylee, understandably, collapsed to the floor, totally broken and overcome by grief. The sort of grief that hits you so deep, you never come back from it quite the same person. It was later revealed in court that Kaur had had these dark thoughts about harming her daughter for a long time. Even from when she was born, she said that she knew Shay had an expiry date on her life. To her, this wasn't murder. It was a relief. A relief that no one could take her away now. No one could have her. The irony being, the people who were going to take her away were going to do so because of her actions, her neglect, her abuse. And it was at a coroner's hearing that her cause of death was confirmed as being from those multiple stab wounds from her mum. Kaur had initially denied murder, but later pleaded guilty to manslaughter by way of diminished responsibility. She was diagnosed with severe paranoid schizophrenia and was deemed a danger to both herself and the public. Yet despite that diagnosis, she was still found to be Gillick competent, which means she was capable of understanding what was going on at the trial and she was able to plea. Her defence said that she'd been isolated while on remand, hadn't received any letters or visitors. But that wasn't true. Kaylee's sister had written to Kaur, and Kaur had also said she was grateful to Shay's school for organising her funeral. But that was also a twist on the truth. Kaur had requested that her school organise the funeral. It wasn't a surprise. And the funeral in question took place on September 5th, 2024. It started at the school, the procession with 2 white horses, carrying a small pink coffin. Mourners walking behind the carriage were wearing purple and pink, Shay's favourite colours. In the months after Shay's death, it became clear that not only social services had failed her, but her school had as well. Think of those 8 months that passed between the first safe and well check and the second. Why wasn't more done in the interim? Shay had been absent for months. Yes, there's a 6 or 7 week holiday in the summer, but what about the months before that, the last few terms of the year? This surely is a safeguarding failure. And some of their comments, the schools, have actually come under severe scrutiny because they've either been misleading or outright false. They said that they were the only ones who sat in the funeral home with Shay, but that was because they wouldn't let anybody else in. No one else got the chance to see her. They also claim that the school community alone raised £9,000 to pay for the funeral, but that also wasn't true. There was a GoFundMe page set up which quickly raised £4,000 within 24 hours and it soon rose to 8.5. But because of an admin error, the funds were payable to Shay upon release, and that meant that no one else could withdraw the funds. It ultimately led to every single donator being refunded. So the community had tried to raise money, but due to an admin error, it didn't go ahead. It's also worth noting that a government grant pretty much covered all the funeral costs and the directors waived their fees. What's even more heartbreaking is Kaylee was reported to the police by the school. This was because she collected some of the tribute teddies that had been placed outside of Shay's home. Because of the weather, they were getting all dirty and groggy. She wanted to clean them so that Shay could have them with her at a final resting place, nice and clean and fresh. She told the school this. They knew what was happening. So did the funeral directors. It just added more heartbreak and pain to an already devastating situation. On October 25th, 2024, Kaur appeared in court. She was 33 years old. And because of her diagnosis for severe paranoid schizophrenia and her plea, she was found guilty of manslaughter by way of diminished responsibility. With that, she was handed an indefinite hospital order. No prison for her. Secure hospital is where she'll remain, potentially for the rest of her life. As well as handing out that sentence, the judge ordered an inquest into Sandwell Children's Services. It was them who'd handled Shay's case. But to be honest, there wasn't much optimism there. There'd previously been an inquest into them in 2022. That came after multiple instances of child abuse and also child deaths under their watch. No action was taken on the back of that inquest. And in the time since Shay's death, support for Kaylee and her cause has sadly faded. People want to move on. They want to forget about it. But Kaylee doesn't. She can't. She won't. Alongside a small circle of friends, she's continuing the fight to keep Shay's name in the public eye. She wants to push for this petition I alluded to at the start of the episode. It essentially calls for any child who's been arrested on suspicion of murdering their own child to have their parental rights waived. The reason for this is to plan stuff like funerals. For example, in Shay's case, the coroner wouldn't release her body because her mum, who'd killed her, didn't give consent to do so. There is a link for the petition in the episode description as I mentioned, should you care to sign it. Ideally, it would say parents who were charged with murdering their child, but Kaylee's informed me that they did originally do the petition with that wording, but because of the complexity of this case, they had to change it to what it is currently, which is accused of murdering their own child. And just to finish with a bit more context, which just shows that Shay really had no chance in this life. Her dad, Hamad, was sent to prison in July 2024 for killing someone. So both her parents are murderers. And like Kaur, Hamad also pleaded guilty to manslaughter by way of diminished responsibility. He cited a traumatic brain injury occurred in a car crash in 2014. But despite Shay not really having a chance in life, for the first 5 or so years, she was loved. She had a normal-ish childhood. She had one parent in her life that wasn't blood-related, but was a bloody good one. She knew what love was because of Kaylee. If you've been touched by this story, then please do consider signing the petition in the episode description. It would really help Kaylee out, everyone that's fighting this cause for Shay, and it would show your support greatly. If you want a more in-depth version of this story, go check out the audio version of this episode on British Murders with Stuart Blues. It's available on all your podcast players or at britishmurders.com. It's episode 4 of season 18. It'd be great if you could like this video, share it far and wide, consider subscribing to the channel if you will. I've been Stuart Blues, this has been British Murders. Until next time, cheerio.